This is where it's smack that case closed. He was an epileptic. Condition during revelations. Let's get to this. This is the most important, juiciest, and relevant part of the presentation, and where all of the symptomology is. Okay, the aura of ringing bells. How does the Wahi inspiration come to you? He said, it comes to me like the ringing of a bell, and is most severe for me when it is over attained, or at times the angel in the form of a human being, and I retain whatever he speaks. We have discussed in papers before that ringing bell sounds are precursors to seizures is extremely common. In fact, we had a literal case example with the exact same thing. Let's go to the next lip smacking and jittery teeth. When Muhammad would get the inspiration, he would bear it with great trouble, and he used to move his lips quickly with the inspiration. It would be something like this, which is lip smacking or rhythmic, and it's an automatism, right? But what's happening here is Muslims are saying, oh no, it's just because he's following the angel fast, which is, like Samir said, is a confabulation and a post hoc rationalization. Now, on the one on the right side, you see when the revelation came to the Messenger of Allah, one could hear what sounded like the drone of bees before his face. And to me, this sounds like his teeth were jittering. If you do this fast enough in a seizure, it'll sound like a very... That's probably what it is, but it's bizarre on its own. This is hilarious. Now, Muhammad would sometimes snort like a camel when he would get the revelation from Allah. It's embarrassing. So this guy comes in and he wants to see, and I'll quote, would it please you to see the Messenger of Allah receiving the revelations? Omar lifted a corner off the cloth, and I looked at him, and he was emitting a sound of snorting. The narrator said, I thought it was the sound of a camel. When he was relieved of this, he said, and then he gives his ideas in Revelation. This is just straight up embarrassing. This is a straight up seizure. The guy's on the ground, and he's snorting like a camel.
So, like, sounds to me that like Omar was running a sort of freak show, like like, hey, look behind the curtain at the Prophet receiving revelation, and he's like sweating like a camel. Like, what a strange hadith.
Yeah, what a strange hadith. Now, what you're looking at, this is just ridiculous. In this book called The True Guidance Part 4, now these are certain hadith that you have to really dig, and you can't find them on the sunnah.com because they're in Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal's Musnad and whatnot. Those aren't uploaded. But here, the authoritative hadith tradition relate that Muhammad used to faint whenever revelations came to him, which did happen a lot. We will go to specific examples later. It is claimed that he used to act like a drunkard, which is also well known. So when he would get the revelation, he'd start acting like he's drunk and confused, which disorganized behavior and speech, very common. One guy claims that he's taken out of this world. Now, remember Saint Brigida, her body floating out of this world and stuff? Another similarity. Abu Hurairah says that when Muhammad received revelation, he was overwhelmed by trembling. Now, what I feel is the trembling that was happening when he saw Gabriel, which he ascribes to fear, is probably not the same. But the idea that he was overwhelmed by shaking, this is just a tonic-clonic seizure. Another account says that he became distressed. This is hilarious. Foaming at the mouth and closing his eyes. At this point, it should be clear that if you were sitting in the 21st century and you knew modern neuroscience and you have this guy who's, let's say, time travels from 7th century Arabia, and he's having these disturbances in front of him, and he's telling you he's talking to God and whatnot, would you take anything that he says seriously? Of course not. Like, this is a joke, an embarrassment at this point.
And honestly, how many millions of people took this seriously only because they were not given a choice? I mean, the Islamic Empire spread using a lot of not so, like basically coercion, right? There's a lot of
coercion,
right? And even at Muhammad's time, even the great companions, Amr ibn Alas, Khalid bin Walid, and I forgot what the third one was, they all realized the tide was turning. Militarily speaking, Muhammad was winning, and they all switched sides and they joined him, right? And so there was still some battles going on, but the fact is that even if you didn't believe him, and apparently according to Yasir Qadi, to the very end, Abu Sufyan was skeptical up to the conquest of Makkah. Still was skeptical. Is this man really a prophet? But eventually everybody had to join him, because either you joined him or you died.
Well, like the fact that most people like left Islam right after he died is quite in its own evidence that people really didn't believe him, and it was mostly political alliance.
Yeah.
The fact that Muhammad, in his earliest parts of his career as a messenger in his 13 years at Mecca, was extremely unsuccessful, yet those parts of the Quran appear to be the most eloquent and beautiful relatively. So you can kind of see that it wasn't really the Quran or his poetry that was convincing people. Islam really began to grow when he became politically significant.
Yep, right? That's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah.
Now Ibn Kathir has this whole chapter in his Sirah Nabawiyya, how the revelation used to come to the Prophet. Honestly, it's literally a chapter. You can rename it to symptoms or a case study of epilepsy. No joke. It's literally 99% of those are just epilepsy symptoms. So we're going to go through this left screenshot. And we've already gone over the ringing bell. What we're looking for is agonizing pain and sweating on a cold day. So Aisha says, I saw him when revelation came to him on the extremely cold day. Then I left him and his forehead was bathed in perspiration. Okay. And then if you go down in the hadith, by God, the messenger did not get up, nor did any member of the family leave until revelation came down to him. He underwent the agony that used to seize him with sweat emerging like pearls from him, even though it's a winter's day, because of the heavy burden of revelation that came down upon him. So just to give you an idea that this guy is suffering immense pain from the seizure. And it's sad at this point where you start feeling sad for these people because of how they were tricked into or lured into believing in all of this nonsense. Why couldn't God have made the descent of his revelation a joyful experience? Because we do have ecstatic epileptic seizures as well. The fact that he chose the epilepsy that seems to be causing pain it doesn't really make sense. And the whole point, now just one thing to remember, all of the symptoms and all of these anomalies you will go through, the Muslim position, the explanation to counter all this evidence in neuroscience is it was the burden of revelation. No joke, that's it. And to me, that is one of the most ignorant explanations about this phenomenon I could find. Like, it's just not true. All right, so
sorry, I want to make a point before you move on, which was very interesting. Pulekeshin in the comments made a very good point, which is it's quite likely that early on these were authentic experiences, but later on, like, the less poetic, beautiful verses, like halal to you, this and this and this and this, and when this person dies, you give this much, to your mother and this much to your father, whatever. All of those are probably revelations of convenience. And to me, the most damning one of all is the marriage to Zainab.
We will get to that at the end.
Okay. Yeah.
What's interesting is the question arises: was Muhammad just psychotic and deluded, but yet sincere in his belief, or was he actually eventually aware of his own fallibility and his fakeness, but kept the ploy going? Right? Because in the initial parts of his life at Mecca, he gets sad, and then the revelation pauses, and then he's trying to commit suicide. But then later on in Medina, he's just summoning verses at will whenever he wants them, right? So again, there's a thing like, is it him actually being psychotic and sincere in his delusion, or is he actually knows that he's a liar but just keeps the ploy going and he's a con man? that's something up to speculation, right? So
Indeed, it is a speculation, but there's a lot of red flags where he actually benefited
oh yeah,
greatly
100%.
from revelations. The Zainab thing, sleeping with the captives of war,
The Aisha dream, marriage.
Yeah, Aisha's dream, even adjusting the verses based on what the companion is saying. For example, the women are complaining, the women, even back then, the Muslim women complained, how come all of the verses about men? Like,
yeah.
And Allah's like, I'll throw you a bone. Oh, you guys are equal too. You know, a man, man, the believing women, the righteous man, the fasting woman, whatever the verse was like. And at that point, it's like it's coming on demand, like you said, right? Like revelation on demand, the abrogation thing, like a lot of the verses about jihad, like these. There's just too many red flags here. He's just benefiting from this, right? And I know right at the end, if you guys wait until the very end, Gondal has a very interesting clip about a modern prophet who benefited from his revelations as well, which is
identical to Muhammad.
Yeah, so wait for it. We're gonna get.
Let's go to the next one. So we have heavy breathing, hyperventilation, flushing of color from face, and agonizing pain. In the top left, we see that Ubaidah ibn Samir reported that when revelation descended upon Muhammad, he felt a burden on that account that the color of his face underwent a change. I think it's called facial flushing or something like that. Again, very common. Now, Al-Tirmidhi related this, that we only know, okay. Yeah, so the messenger of God would become in pain when the revelation came to him, and his face would look very serious. According to one account, this wording should be, and his eyes would close, and we recognize that in him. I didn't mention this earlier, one of the slides earlier, there was and you can read up on this too, was a lot of the times when some people have seizures, they close their eyes and they're unable to open them. And that's one thing. But these are like absent seizures. Okay, let's go back for one moment.
I'm just wondering out loud, like, I'm still kind of laughing at that previous example of Omar lifting the curtain to show the wedding prophet. But like, I wonder how many of the people around him knew this was actually some sort of crazy thing and were taking advantage.
The Quran does record up to 30 and 28 instances with varying degrees where they're calling him a liar, forger, soothsayer, crazy poet, and whatnot.
But I'm talking about not these guys. I'm talking about his companions knowing.
Yeah.
Omar, Abu Bakr.
But they did not notice the weirdness, right?
Were they just taking advantage of his, his situation? And
yeah, because they ended up they did become the killer.
Did well, eh? If I may.
So, okay, this one's okay. So this one is a very interesting one, and it's a variation of the one prior, where he was snorting like a camel. In this hadith in Bukhari, that was in Muslim, says that the Prophet waited for a while, and divine inspiration descended upon him. And in that one, he said he summoned it on, but this one he had to wait. Jala came and pushed his head underneath the screen which was covering the Prophet, and behold, the Prophet's face was red, and he kept on breathing heavily for a while, and then he was relieved. Again, you can see it's another seizure. You can even say the heavy breathing could be translated or could be taken by the other narrator as snorting like a camel. But now what we have is in Ibn Kathir, Volume 1. Here we said, would you like to look at the messenger of Allah, the revelations coming to him? He raised the edge of his robe from his face, and it was all flush, and he would moan like a newborn calf. So the camel moaning has switched a little bit to the calf moaning.
Can you do a demonstration for this?
I don't know how. I mean, it's something like that. Like, imagine this guy's just laying on the ground, snorting like weird sounds like a camel or a calf, and he wakes up and said, oh yeah, God just gave me this message.
But not snorting like a pig though. That's how.
Yeah. Oh yeah, make sure. Or the donkey, the braying of the ass. And what we see is like the snorting there. Then we see here's something interesting. She then went to the messenger, questioned him while he was sitting, having suffered, holding his mug in his hand. God sent down when the mug was in his hand. He raised his head and said, You women have been given permission. So this is like you said earlier, like we were talking about. Was this even an instance of revelation, or like he was just holding eating this thing, and the women like, "Can we go?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, God told me just go up."
What is this example? Is this when he was about to die? You talking about?
No, no, no. He was when Omar concerning the hijab, his wife Sauda going out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you women have been given permission to go out and attend your need, and you can say like this isn't even a revelation. He's just sitting there with the cup in his hand, and he's just like, yeah, yeah, go ahead, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of this post-ictal psychosis, the revelation does not always correspond to the seizure event. It can be due to the psychosis state that ensues after seizures that could last months. And they say this is now what also important is this shows that revelation did not fully absent his feelings from. Like I said, there are different types of seizures. In tonic clonic, you lost consciousness. There's absent seizure and some other seizures, you do not lose consciousness. Well, this shows that he had complex partial seizures. Now, another one is when messenger of God, he would get the revelation, he would become pale, he would ignore those with him, and none of them would address him. Ignore those with him. This could be again absent seizures where he's lost focus and he's zoned out. Now, what's important is the intensity of the pain described. And never once did I receive the revelation without thinking that my soul was being seized by it, to the point where Muhammad saw it every time it felt like he's going to die. Another thing, again, reported is when the revelation came to him, he could still see his eyes remain open while his hearing and heart were made empty, and that he would get a headache and would cover his head with a henna plant. Self-explanatory again. We've gone through this one before, but this is an interesting one where severe sweating before revelation occurs again, but this time it's with Aisha. So the stress that Aisha was accused of cheating on Muhammad and whatnot. Read the words. This is hilarious. By Allah, I never thought that Allah would reveal divine inspiration in my case. I consider myself too inferior and unworthy. I hoped Muhammad might have a dream which Allah might prove my innocence. By Allah, Allah's apostle now got up and nobody had left the house before the divine inspiration came to the Allah's apostle. So there overtook him the same state which used to overtake him when he used to have on being finally devoured. He was sweating so much that the drops of sweat were dropping like pearls, though it was a crazy cold wintry day. When the state was over, he was smiling, and the first word he said, Aisha, thank Allah, for Allah has declared your innocence.
This one is very convenient because I mean, he was in a lot of trouble because Aisha came. I mean, he's an old man and Aisha is a young lady, and she comes in back into the town with this, handsome young man who is bringing her in. And, people start talking and they're like, oh my God, this is bad. So now Muhammad is a problem. Mm-hmm. What do you do with Aisha, right? And this actually solves the problem. Oh, Allah saved her, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that she just don't accept this, right? I don't know how they don't believe she was innocent, which is weird. But anyways, that's innocent.
Now this is an interesting one. It's from Tabri Volume 8, and this is about Zainab's marriage to Muhammad.
So what are all of these examples showing? Is it to show that these are convenient revelations now? What are you proving?
Well, it's showing that if not only just convenient, but like this one is showing like what I could speculate is if he's actually psychotic or having a post-ictal psychotic phase, what you can see here is he might be completely sincere and actually might be having these things. It's just that the stress or the things that are triggering those seizures are unknown because epilepsy is mostly idiopathic.
What does that mean?
What is showing here is that before this episode, or before he can say that, oh, he's talking to God or getting a revelation, he's fainting, he's having ringing bell sounds, he's jittery teeth, snorting. So it shows that the fallibility of the experience itself and the subjectivity of it. But then on top that the convenience attached to it too. Why this specific example of Zainab? I can't say that he was just doing it for pure benefit, because like we said at the end of the case study we show, the identical symptoms is he could have actually thought, like if he's psychotic, he actually thought that God wanted him to suddenly marry his adopted son's wife.
Oh
Or
yeah.
you
Yeah.
could also speculate that he really liked her and he used God to marry her to himself.
Mhm.
I would side with the former explanation,
Oh yeah.
keeping in mind the video we see at the end.
So so what you're saying is, if I can kind of reword this a bit, if Muhammad was narcissistic enough combined with the psychosis or had delusions of grandeur, people like this tend to feel like the world is for them and is handed on a silver platter, and they cannot distinguish between the inner voice and their own external world, to the point where they feel like, you know, if God is, he believed, if he really truly believed God was speaking to him, God becomes him. And when God tells him to do something, he doesn't even really, he may not even necessarily realize that he's actually making it up per se. Is that kind of like, am I saying?
Yes. He's so delusional or lost in his own delusions that he actually believes that God is telling him this. Yeah.
It's all instinct. It's all just raw emotion.
Yeah.
It's not like, he's not like rationally, psychopathically making a plan, but it's just like whatever he needs, it's like God is doing it for him.
One of the other things was the authors of the San Brigida paper brought this up, that you could see that how a new idea will arise and the previous one would be abandoned, or the evolution of ideas in light of epilepsy. You could trace the thought process. Anyway, so in this one, this is with Zainab. While the messenger of God was talking with Aisha, a fainting overcame him. When he was released from it, he smiled and said, "Who will go to Zainab to tell her the good news, saying that God has married her to me?" And then he recited the verse, and Aisha wasn't happy. But the point is that he faints.
Aisha wasn't happy.
The point is she was so jealous. Listen to this. She still remembers that Zainab gave Salama some anklets that she was wearing. Like,